Hello, everyone. Happy Friday and welcome to Stellavision, Stellarizing's marketing update. It's the news you need during these tumultuous times. I am Marlia Clark, as ever, CMO. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, I am fangirling because we have Kelly Kovack, founder of Beautymatter, with us to talk all things beauty. Kelly is so well known. She's a longtime advisor to the beauty industry, as well as an entrepreneur in her own right, and truly one of the business's most insightful experts. And she is also a lot of fun. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I was looking forward to this. We always
Yay.
have great chats.
We do. And one day we will do them live again.
I know, right?
But for right now, so happy to be with you virtually. As Kelly and I talked today, we wanted to pull up just a few stats to kind of guide our conversation. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, of course, beauty in general. What's happening? So Elizabeth, if you could go to the slide. Yep, so a couple of trends that we've seen are clean and made in America. Those seem to be really accelerating. This was from research that we did with our own community. That's a lot of what we'll be pointing to today, just to see what women are thinking. Kelly, in your view, how do you see the trends? What do you think are the most important trends in beauty for brands to lean into?
Well, to some extent, I think the concept of clean has almost become table stakes. But I think the problem is there's no real definition of it. There is no body governing it. So it's a little bit of a free-for-all. So clean means whatever that retailer dictates it to be, or whatever that brand dictates it to be. So I think consumers have spoken. They want products that are safe. They want products that are not toxic. They want products that are not going to make them sick. And I think the most interesting conversations are talking to formulators and scientists to get their perception of what clean is. Because clean is green, it's natural, it's organic, but natural and organic aren't necessarily always safe. So, it's a really complicated concept that's being marketed in a very simplified way.
I totally agree. I feel like those terms need definition, and I think some people think there is one, but there really isn't.
No. And so I really think the evolution of this is going to become, and I think it's probably it's one of those trends that will be accelerated because of COVID. But I think consumers are going to really require that brands substantiate their claims. So a lot of these clean brands, we don't see them doing the clinicals that traditional brands do. Well, why not? Right? You can test anything. Do you do it because your product doesn't really work? I mean, so I think that there's going to be this evolution of consumers requiring more out of these clean brands than just sort of the marketing speak that's kind of gotten us to where we are. But these are the kind of brands consumers want, but they also want products that work. They're not willing to walk away from efficacy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like there's such tension there.
Yeah.
You want clean, but man, it better work.
Yeah.
I think of clean working really well for my college-age daughter. She's young. How much efficacy, does she need? But as you're paying more, particularly in the more premium space, it needs to have the science behind it. I think that's a little bit challenging. Just when you're thinking about some of those trends, what do you think about color right now? I mean, there's sort of, it was down a little. We're obviously on Zoom calls and not in the office anymore, mostly. What do you think about color?
Listen, I think the beauty business, any business is cyclical. So I think that we were coming off of kind of the heyday of color. Color was so perfectly situated to take advantage of what was happening with Instagram. It was so Instagrammable. Like, you didn't have to think about how to create a strategy for a color brand. But now skincare brands are kind of coming into their own. So I also think, you had almost this formula that started where it's like newness was about collaborations and palette launches. At some point, like how many palettes does one human being need? So this SKU proliferation, SKU proliferation is never a good strategy. So I think there was kind of this confluence of the market saturation in the category and a formula that just wasn't working anymore. And then you had sort of the changing of customer preferences. That's been amplified through COVID. I think that, when we did the walkthrough, I was like, are we going to be on camera or not? Because I was going to, do I need to put makeup on or not? Do I need to do my hair or not? So I think everyone is absolutely using less products, but specifically less makeup products. But, I think makeup will come back. I think it will be just an evolution of it. And it will be, I think, color cosmetics and makeup are already merging, but it's going to be color brands that have skincare benefits. I think probably what has gone away from a trend perspective is that sort of heavy Instagram look. You can already kind of see that, like on TikTok, the looks are much more natural.
Yeah.
Unless they're trying to be very theatrical, which is very different than sort of like that heavily contoured Instagram look trying to pass itself off as like everyday makeup.
I totally see that. I know it's probably out of date already, but the Visco girl. I sort of do have a Visco girl myself, and so I know it's that lip gloss and or not even gloss, but balm,
Yeah.
and a very natural. You got off the sports field.
But they're using a lot of products.
Yes. Oh, yes. But exactly. But it's just changed. But I love thinking of it as cyclical because it'll all come back and suddenly people will just say, I need color in my life.
And also, you have also kind of the e-girl kind of counterpoint to the Visco girl who, these e-girls are wearing a lot of makeup, but it's much more theatrical and it's more of like a creative expression. And on TikTok, it's these characters they create. They're not walking around looking like that. So it's a really different relationship with makeup.
I love that. I actually like it having that place because it is fun. And I
Yeah.
think it's a freer gender expression. It's just sort of overall, we're going to have fun with this, which I feel like, yeah, fun we could use in these times.
Yeah.
I think that's great. So just with the next slide, Elizabeth, what for smaller beauty brands, and that's a lot of, who we talk to. I know you talk to brands across the spectrum, but we in particular talk to the smaller brands. We saw, our good friends at Google, people can say what they want, but they search. So we just looked at the search volume overall, and you can see that in July, the searches actually were way up for beauty. So beauty's not dead, but it was heavily on the cleansers, lotions, tools. Those were really growing the fastest. But what do you think that the smaller beauty brands really need to think about now?
Well, first and foremost, I know it's not the sexiest topic, but they need to be watching their cash flow, and they need to make sure they have a runway to keep their doors open. I think that sometimes financial discipline is not or a sort of financial aptitude is not sort of a core competency of a lot of founder-driven brands because they tend to be a little bit more creative thinkers. But I think anytime you're in a crisis situation, economic, or we kind of have a trifecta of crises going on right now. But you need to make sure that you have a really sort of laser focus on cash flow. Because it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters if you do not have enough money to keep your doors open. And it's not an easy time to go fundraising right now. So, not the sexiest thing, but I would say, every week you need to be sort of reevaluating what your priorities are based on kind of real-time cash flow. So getting the unsexy business thing out of the way. I think the other thing is customer service and community. So, you know, I think the brands that are growing, because there are brands that are growing. There are brands that are suffering, but there are also brands that are growing. And the brands that are growing are focusing on deepening their relationship with their consumers in a really meaningful way, and not giving lip service to community, but really getting in there, rolling their sleeves up and saying, hey, you know, we're in this together. And I think there was this moment where you didn't have to be perfect. And brands that showed up and just kind of said, listen, we're going through this too. You know, I'm in my house, I'm doing Zoom meetings, like, you know, so I think there's this time to embrace imperfection, and we're kind of in it. Technology doesn't always work, but you just kind of have to roll with it because that's the reality. And I think the brands that have been able to kind of just get in it and ride this wave are the ones that are really succeeding. And I also think, you know, I've sort of seen brands, there are some that are just kind of sitting and waiting for things to go back to normal. And I'm sorry to say, I don't think that's going to happen. And then you
Voice
have,
of doom, voice of doom.
but I don't think, but
True.
that's not necessarily like I'm not saying normal is better than where we're going to end. It's just not going to be what we used to know.
I,
Um,
I love that perspective. It's not, I actually find a lot of optimism there.
yeah,
You're absolutely right.
I'm really optimistic about what's happening, but it's not going to look like what it was sort of pre, you know, March 15th.
Yeah.
And you have other brands that are just shell shocked, you know, like really just don't know where to start. And it's hard because you have, on one hand, you have this economic thing going on, you have a cultural thing going on, business has totally changed. Like it's a lot to navigate, and I understand that. And then you have other people who are just embracing it. They're like, I have no idea what we're going through, but we got to figure it out. And there has been a tremendous amount of creativity, and not everything's working. And we're going through sort of uncertainty, and I think trends, there aren't a lot of new trends. I think we've just seen trends accelerate.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a very good time to be looking at search because that has changed based on kind of what's going on. So DIY spiked. And there was that great Walmart quote where, you know, people went from buying toilet paper and hand sanitizer to sort of clippers and hair dye. You know, but it was, you know, you wouldn't see that happening if you weren't sort of looking at search. And then maskne popped. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're watching search, you can jump on it and capture those things. But they're kind of fleeting moments.
Yep, I love watching the search. Actually, I think it's so interesting, and seeing what's less and what's more, and
Like
it's
I find
so
it
moment by moment.
fascinating. I find it fascinating that we just talked about how makeup is like in the dumps and makeup brushes and tools are up 22%. Like,
In the first
what do
week
you
of
need
July.
brushes for?
I know. Yep, I totally agree. I know you talk about those trends, and then you're like, well, actually, though, what if if you see what people are really searching, and we've
Yeah.
seen that, I know among our own client base, tools are actually booming, and exactly, you're using them for makeup. And I thought this was a little bit hilarious that lipstick and gloss was up 9%, because if you wear a mask, it lipstick and gloss are a problem. I'm very interested to see where eyes go, because I think
Yeah.
eyes are going to be the thing. But I thought it was, maybe people still want to feel great with that lipstick, so they still want to have that fun with it. I think that's great. So helpful talking about all the trends. So now we'd like to shift a little bit and talk about channel. Still beauty. So this one, I have to, I'm including this in every single thing I'm doing lately, but e-commerce grew more in 2 months than it did in the past 10 years. So this
Mhm.
is broad. This is from the US Department of Commerce. It's not just beauty, but I mean that it's just so dramatic. However, as we see on the next slide, in real life still is very important to people. So the stat from eMarketer was the US average for retail shopping is still, this was recent, still 85% in-store and 15% online for their preference. But then when we asked our community, where are you actually buying things? You can see that it's fairly balanced, really, although for skincare, you see a dramatic shift online.
Mhm.
Eye and face makeup, 60-40. Hair care and personal care seem a little bit more split. But my question for you for beauty brands is, do you think consumers are going to go back to brick and mortar?
I do. I do. I think I don't know when. Um, and for this, I sort of have been looking towards China to see
Yeah.
how those consumer. I think, you know, I really do think that China, in so many ways, is like a crystal ball into the future of the rest of the world. They're just so sophisticated, and both their consumers are way more sophisticated than Western consumers, and their marketing is just so much more dynamic and complex. Um, uh, and I do think that consumers are going to go back to the store. Um, I think first and foremost, retailers need to make consumers feel safe. So until consumers feel safe to go back into the store, that's not going to happen. And I honestly think that what we're going through now is making us, there's a lot of conversations happening, clean sheet conversations, because it really is a time. COVID has given us an opportunity to totally reinvent our brands if that's what is necessary. Anything
Yeah.
is possible. You have the excuse of it was COVID, I needed to change everything, and it's
Yeah.
totally valid. And so, when were like germ-ridden tester units ever a good idea? I say never, right?
I know. It does make you rethink everything you sort of took for granted. You're like, oh, that was horrible. What were we doing?
Right. I mean, everyone always talked about how disgusting they were, but no one did anything because that's the way it was always done.
Yeah,
And so
totally agree.
now that some of those decisions that they were probably bad and needed to evolve anyway, we're being forced to rethink things in a really dramatic way. And Sephora and Ulta have been doing great, but department stores have been broken for a long time. And so you almost needed this seismic change, right? Yeah, to blow it up, to rebuild it.
Yeah.
But that was never going to happen under normal circumstances because, you have investors, shareholders, whatever. You can't blow up a Macy's, right? But
No,
now it's been blown up.
it has been blown
So,
up. Yeah.
I think it's going to be really exciting. I think we're going to go through this super awkward phase because we're still sort of in the mindset of how products are sold at retail. And, beauty is a really high touch category. And we've had some conversations around this about, like, how do you test skincare texture when you can't touch someone? What does that animation look like?
Yeah.
So, I think one interesting thing that I think is going to happen is a lot of the technology that we've seen at retail that's sort of been a little bit of, like, not smoke and mirror, but like it's been more entertainment than it has heavy lifting. I
Yeah.
think all of a sudden technology is going to have to do the heavy lifting. Um, and there's so many really cool platforms like Hero, like these that are really sort of connecting all these points that truly make an omni-channel experience.
I
Um,
totally agree. I feel like beauty hasn't talked enough about digital transformation. It's kind of been left a lot to the McKinseys and the enterprise type companies when you think about it that way. And beauty, as you say, it's got the creative, it's driven so much by passion, and
Yeah.
digital transformation needs to come to its shores.
Well, and also, the beauty advisor, I always get on my soapbox about beauty advisors, because you know what, at the end of the day, those beauty advisors pay all of us. They are like, they are the last 6 inches of any transaction. They're the ultimate influencers. They close sales, and they're often the last people thought about in the industry. And they have been at such a disadvantage for so long, where you have consumers coming into a retail store with their iPhone with so much information that then you have sort of this poor beauty advisor who's at a disadvantage. They can't access their iPhone because it's not allowed on the sales floor.
Yep. Oh, I think that's such a great point. The last 6 inches of the transaction. Yeah. It's so important. And I think it also, it fits with the times, I think, to be thinking about the people on the floor, the people there every day. I think that is so important to remember them. And you're right, it's rarely part of the conversation.
And there have been some brands that, instead of furloughing their sort of field staff, they're the ones that are handling customer service. They're the ones doing these master classes. So they've really sort of, I think the role of beauty advisors, I think smart brands are going to expand that, because who knows more about your brand than the person dealing with customers day in, day out selling it?
Yes.
Why can't they be an influencer, a micro influencer? Why can't they pitch hit on customer service? So I think that the role of beauty advisors can be so much more than sort of standing on a sales floor, to create sort of a true omni-channel, sort of modern digital way of clienteling.
I'm excited for that. There's a bright side, I definitely think. Elizabeth, if you can go to the next one. Moving on from that, I think it really ties into creating community. You've touched on that a little bit already. We noticed in our community that the pandemic actually made women in particular happier with technology. I think previously there was an upside, but there were a lot of downsides. And I think people now, when you're stuck in your house, you see more the positive side of your phone, and you're seeing that technology connects you to people. So how do you think, I think what you've talked about are some great ways, but are there other ways that brands can connect better with their consumers?
Yeah, I think that it needs to be conversational, and it can't be reactive, and it can't be chasing other brands and what other brands are doing. Like, I think you need to know your consumer inside and out. Who is your tribe? What makes them tick? It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It matters who your consumers are and why they love you. And I think if you can create that connection and have that deep level of understanding of who it is that is drawn to your brand, if you understand that, then it's easy to amplify it. If you're just talking at people, you're never going to have a real community. It's just going to be like one of those slides you have in a fundraising deck, like, yeah, I have a community. It's like, no, you have a bunch of followers on social media. It's not a community. Yeah. They're like fundamentally different things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that actually brings us to our next point. How should beauty brands be thinking about social right now? This is something our clients in particular it's just so fraught right now, because as we say, for our DTC small and medium-sized brands, Facebook and Instagram give you scale, competitive CPAs, frictionless shopping. They are strong revenue drivers for our brands, particularly as brick and mortar closed. That is where consumers are. However, as we know, there are challenges. Facebook in particular, there's data concerns, there's a host of Black Lives Matter concerns. all just so many challenges that we have right now. How do you think beauty brands should really be thinking about social platforms?
Well, taking just one step back, I think people need to be reassessing the value-based claims they're making. Because I think one thing that's getting a lot of brands in trouble right now, especially D2C brands, is they've made these very sweeping value-based claims that they quite honestly, they're not doing it. They're talking about it, they're not doing it, and they're getting called out on it. That's like just a recipe for disaster. It's like, don't say things that you're not doing. You know, it's like focus on what you care about and what you're doing. Because then it doesn't matter if someone calls you out because you're doing it, you're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
I do think I think Instagram and Twitter particularly are very, with Black Lives Matter, have been very, very difficult, or not difficult, but challenging. You know, I think it's not easy, but I think the only way through sort of this cultural shift that we're seeing is going to be a lot of awkward conversations. That's the only way things are going to change. And that's a really difficult place for a brand to be. I think, I think that Pinterest is a safe place right now, right? And I'm a big Pinterest pusher. I always have been. I think that Instagram has kind of been the go-to channel for lots of reasons for beauty. But I think, Pinterest is kind of this sleeper. The dynamics are very different. Consumers are going there looking for things. It doesn't require that 24/7 vigilance, is something blowing up on Instagram that I'm missing? So, and, the behavior on Pinterest is really mirroring what people are going through. They're searching for self-care. They're searching for mindfulness. I think now, especially when there's time, building out a presence on Pinterest, I think is a really good part of a strategy, rather than just sort of focusing on Instagram. And
Yeah.
but I think at the end of the day, yes, we have a lot going on in the world that makes social media sort of challenging.
Yeah.
But I think, you've got to be true to who you are, and really mindful of what you're communicating.
I think that's great.
And be willing to have a hard conversation in a really honest way. I think honesty right now honesty will always help you get through anything, I think.
I think that really should be the key takeaway. Honesty does win. No, I think you're absolutely right. That's what we tell our clients as well. Be who you are. Don't
Yeah,
say things you aren't doing. And if it makes you think about what you're doing, that's probably good. That is good.
exactly.
Have the difficult conversation. And I do second the interest in Pinterest,
Yeah,
because one thing I love about Pinterest, it's very much a place of joy or positivity, because people are looking, as you say, when you look at the searches, people are planning their weddings, or
yeah,
they're planning their nursery. They're looking at hairstyles. And obviously Instagram and Facebook, right, they do a stronger ROI. We can't argue with that for our clients, but they are not purely places of joy, where they
yeah,
certainly can be, but there's a lot of other
yeah.
stuff going on.
I saw a recent sort of trends from Pinterest, and some of the trends that are, or some of the things that are trending on Pinterest, are people thinking about kind of what do they want their life to be. So starting new businesses. So there really it is a place of positivity where people are thinking of, okay, the world has, I don't know what's going on, but what can I do about it? And
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's kind
it
of
sort
cool
of
when
has
you
a
look at it that way.
practicality about it, Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, great. What we wanted to finish with was a little bit about Amazon and looking
Mhm.
into the future. And Amazon is sort of the past, present, and future. So
Yep.
we definitely asked our community. Amazon seems to be particularly loved because they feel like they get the lowest price on Amazon. Pricing was very important. Do you think Amazon is going to continue to grow in beauty? We've seen huge growth there, but do you think it's a continued way forward?
I see no indication. I see no indication of it slowing down.
Yeah, it should.
Um, I think that, and we've sort of had this conversation before, there was a time where the beauty industry just had their head in the sand about Amazon. And, I used to have clients and I'm like, wait, what are you going to do about Amazon? We have some resellers, like, and I was like, that's a lot of eyeballs. Like, don't you want to I mean,
It's
it
a
was
lot
kind
of people.
it was kind of a similar to QVC, how if you were on QVC, it was like you couldn't be in retail. It was like a death knell. And then all of a sudden, everyone wanted to be on QVC. So, I think what we've seen now is that you have to have an Amazon strategy, period, end, for lots of different reasons. Um, Even if it is a way of, and I think that you probably, you need to figure out how you're going to do it. It's not for most brands. I think like the Glossiers of the world can say we're never going to sell on Amazon, but they own their channel, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
That's an anomaly. I think for a small brand to say we're never going to be on Amazon, it's just foolish because it's a revenue stream that is fairly steady. It's a little more predictable, I think. How you want to show up on Amazon is totally different. And I also think that if you're going to do Amazon, don't think you can do it yourself because it is, you know, it is a living, breathing thing. And people who are in Amazon and understand how that widget works, listen, it's just like they're in it and you need someone in it to help you build a business there, but it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I think brands just need to be really thoughtful about how they enter the marketplace.
I would totally agree. So we'll finish with one question. When we look forward, we were seeing, they're calling it right now the homebody economy. So as we've talked about, that has implications, particularly for beauty. A lot of them good. As you
Mhm.
say, there's lots of reason for optimism. But what do you think? How do you see consumer confidence going into the fall and beyond? Like if we're having this conversation a year from now, what do you think we'll be talking about?
I think we have a rough year ahead of us. So I don't think that if you look at the unemployment numbers from I think that came out this week, like we're not through this thing. There's still a lot of uncertainty, but I do think that if we're talking a year from now, I think we're going to see some brands that may have been sort of traditional heritage brands kind of having their moment and being sexy, which I think is really cool. I think, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of brands that, maybe they weren't solid business concepts, and they're going to cease to exist. So there's a bit of, beauty Darwinism happening right now, and it's going to be a rough road for everyone. We don't know when retail is going to fully reopen. We don't know a lot of things, but I do think that through all of this difficulty, it's making people take a hard look at their business. Is making people take a hard look about how their teams are structured, how they're treating their teams, what they want their businesses to be, and so or what they can be. And so I am truly optimistic. I think we're going to see some amazing brands and technology come to the forefront. I hope we come out the other side of this sort of being kind of, I don't know, corporately a kinder place. And I also hope that we're seeing this uptick of B corporations and the mentality of be corporations, and we're also seeing government fail us in so many ways, and corporations really stepping up, to solve the problem. The professional beauty industry really stepped up and took care of their own during all of this. So I really hope that we go back to how businesses were run in the 70s before we started seeing profit above all else. And we really start seeing brands think about their communities like their stakeholders and not only their shareholders. And I really think that that's sort of the direction that we're going in. It's not sort of business at all cost anymore. We have to be good corporate citizens.
Well, that is a tremendously optimistic way to end. I'm really excited about that. I will look forward to driving in a VW bus with you back to the 70s, except with better clothes. But as always, Kelly, we of course went long because Kelly and I always go long. I could talk to you forever. Really appreciate you being with us so much. To all the audience, thank you for joining us as well. Please, of course, subscribe to Beautymatter. Kelly has amazing content coming out every week. It's so smart. It's always what I read first. In 2 weeks, we will be back on Stellivision with our Chief Digital Officer, Brandon Hegel, who's going to talk about how brands can not only survive, but push past plateaus. But really, again, thank you, Kelly. Beautymatter forever. And of course, please send any questions our way. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks
you
so much.
too. Bye.
Bye.